My name is Claire Matthews, and I'm not the kind of woman who ever imagined herself in court fighting over furniture, bank accounts, and the truth. I always thought that if something like divorce ever happened to me, it would be mutual, civil, respectful, two adults agreeing to walk away when love runs its course. I never imagined it would turn into a war. And I certainly never thought I'd be standing in front of a judge, playing a recording that would completely unravel the man I once called my best friend. I met Adam in college. He was charming in a way that felt effortless, like he didn't even try to impress anyone, and yet somehow, he always stood out. I was studying graphic design, juggling late-night deadlines and part-time jobs, while he was in business school with a clear path ahead of him. He had big dreams, and honestly, I loved that about him. He made everything sound possible. We dated for 3 years before getting married. And like most couples, we started with nothing. Just a cheap one-bedroom apartment, a second-hand sofa, and each other. But we built our life piece by piece. I started my own small design studio from home while he climbed the corporate ladder. We made it work. I supported him through sleepless nights when he was prepping for presentations, and he encouraged me when I struggled to find clients. I truly believed we were a team. But teams don't hide things from each other. And they certainly don't plan to leave one another broken. It was about a year ago when I started noticing the cracks. Not the kind that come from routine or stress, but the kind that feel more like someone slowly locking you out of your own life. He became secretive, guarded. He started coming home later than usual, brushing me off when I asked simple questions like, "How was your day?" or "Where were you?" At first, I told myself not to overthink it. I mean, relationships change. People get busy. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But then things escalated. He stopped including me in financial decisions, started moving money between accounts without talking to me, and even suggested I shouldn't worry so much about the bills anymore. That part should have made me feel taken care of. Instead, it made my stomach twist. One evening, I overheard him on the phone in the guest room. His voice was low, tense, and when I leaned closer to the door, I heard something that made my blood run cold. "She won't see it coming. By the time she realizes what's happening, the assets will already be separate." I backed away before he could hear me, trying to process what I had just heard. I couldn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling while he snored peacefully beside me, wondering how long he'd been plotting whatever this was. The next morning, I quietly began making my own plans. I started recording anything that seemed even remotely suspicious, not out of paranoia, but because deep down, I knew I was about to need proof. It wasn't long before things got worse. He started acting cold, distant. Like every word out of my mouth annoyed him. He stopped touching me, stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped asking how my day was. I felt like a roommate he barely tolerated. And one morning, he just dropped the bomb like it was no big deal. "I've filed for divorce," he said, not even looking up from his coffee. "It's already in motion." I didn't say a word. I just nodded, stood up from the table, and walked out of the house. I didn't cry. Not right away. The tears came later, in the car, where I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. Not because the marriage was ending, but because of how he was doing it. Cold. Calculated. as if I was just a problem to be eliminated. Over the next few weeks, the legal process began. His lawyer sent over the initial demands, and that's when it hit me like a punch to the chest. He was trying to take everything. The house. The savings. The business I built with my own hands. He even wanted my car, the one that was gifted to me by my parents. And on top of that, he was claiming I owed him money. That I freeloaded 4 years. That I never contributed. That I didn't support his career. It was a lie. All of it. But on paper, it looked clean. Calculated. Like he had thought through every word. Every accusation. My lawyer was shocked. She looked me in the eye and said, "Claire, this isn't just about divorce. He's trying to financially ruin you." That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be civil. This wasn't going to be fair. I was going to have to fight for everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, everything I deserved. And luckily, I had something he didn't know about. I had recordings. Dozens of them. I'd started recording him months ago, ever since that night outside the guest room. Small conversations. Slips of the tongue. Phone calls he took on speaker. Moments when he got too confident, too comfortable, and said things he never should have said out loud. Like the one where he told his friend, "She doesn't know about the other account. I moved the funds last week. She's too naive to even check." Or the one where he laughed and said, "If I push hard enough, she'll break. She'll just give up." Or the one that really sealed it, "I'm not worried. She's emotional. Judges don't take emotional women seriously." I kept every second of it. Organized it by date. Labeled the files. And waited. Court day came faster than I expected. I sat in the courtroom in a modest navy dress, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the edge of the table. He walked in like he was already victorious. Confident. Polished. Like this was just a formality. His lawyer presented the case first, calm, collected, with documents and claims that made me look like a gold digger who brought nothing to the marriage. It hurt to hear those words spoken out loud. To watch the judge listen without knowing the real story. And then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, calm and composed, and said, "Your Honor, we have supplemental evidence we'd like to present." I looked over at Adam. His face shifted. Slightly. Like a man who just realized he might not be holding all the cards after all. My lawyer handed over the first recording. It played over the courtroom speaker, loud and clear. His voice, unmistakable, laughing with his friend about hiding money. Talking about me like I was just a hurdle in his financial plan. The second recording followed. Then the third. Then the one about the judge not taking me seriously. The room was silent. Adam's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. The judge's expression went from neutral to stone cold. And me? I sat there quietly, my heart pounding, watching the truth unravel in real time. I wish I could tell you I felt victorious the moment that first recording played, but honestly, I felt numb. You spend years loving someone, building a life with them, believing you're on the same team, and then you sit in a courtroom and hear them scheme against you like you're nothing more than an obstacle in their way. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like grieving something that was never real to begin with. But I didn't let it show. I kept my head high, my hands steady, even when my heart felt like it was about to beat out of my chest. Adam didn't speak. Not right away. He just sat there, eyes locked forward, jaw tight. I could see the storm behind his eyes, but he didn't dare look at me. Maybe he thought if he didn't react, it wouldn't look as bad. But there was no denying what everyone had just heard. The judge looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since this process began. And I saw something shift in her face too. Like she realized he wasn't the calm, collected victim his paperwork made him out to be. My lawyer didn't stop at the recordings. She presented bank statements, carefully compiled to show how Adam had transferred money to a hidden account over several months. She even showed the date of the first suspicious transaction, just days after he told me not to worry about the bills anymore. That one hurt. Because I remembered that conversation so vividly. I thought he was just being thoughtful. I had no idea he was setting me up. The courtroom was silent as we walked through the timeline. The false narrative Adam had built started to fall apart. And the more we peeled back, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just a bitter divorce, this was premeditated. He hadn't just wanted out. He wanted out clean, with everything we owned, while leaving me empty-handed and humiliated. When the judge called for a short recess, I finally breathed. I don't even remember standing up. I just found myself outside in the hallway, my fingers fumbling to open my water bottle, my knees weak. My lawyer stood beside me, calm as ever, but I could tell even she was surprised at how damning the evidence turned out to be. "He's going to try to settle," she said quietly, glancing down the hall. "Or at least soften the blow." I nodded, unsure what to say. I wasn't even thinking about money anymore. All I could feel was the overwhelming ache in my chest. The betrayal. The sheer weight of how easily someone I trusted had turned against me. And sure enough, moments later, Adam's lawyer approached. She didn't even look me in the eye when she spoke. Just cleared her throat and said, "My client would like to revisit the division of assets and reach a fairer agreement." I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for a second, I saw something in her expression that surprised me. Not arrogance. Not frustration. Just embarrassment. Like even she was ashamed to be associated with this mess. "I'm not interested in his idea of fair," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "We'll let the judge decide." We went back inside, and the tone of the entire proceeding shifted. Gone was the smug, confident man who'd walked into that room like he was 10 steps ahead. Adam now sat hunched slightly, fingers laced tightly, like he was waiting for a sentence to be handed down. His lawyer offered vague language about new evidence and willingness to compromise, but the damage was done. The judge wasn't interested in smoothing things over. Instead, she looked directly at Adam and asked him, "Do you deny the voice on those recordings is yours?" He hesitated. I could see the thoughts racing through his head: deny it, explain it, play the victim. But he knew it was useless. "No," he finally muttered, barely audible. "And do you deny the financial records presented here today?" Another pause. Then a quiet, "No." The judge nodded slowly. "Then we proceed." The ruling didn't come that day. These things take time. But when we left the courthouse, I knew we had shifted the course. I hadn't just defended myself, I'd exposed the truth. Not just to the judge or the lawyers, but to everyone who ever doubted my side of the story. And most importantly, to myself. That night, I didn't go home to cry. I didn't sit in silence or replay every painful word. Instead, I went to a small diner on the edge of town, ordered pancakes and coffee, and just sat. I watched people come and go. Watched life happening. And I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop carrying someone else's lies on your back. Over the next few weeks, the negotiations continued. Adam's team tried to drag their feet, of course, probably hoping I'd cave and take a lesser deal just to end the misery. But I didn't. I waited. I stood firm. And with every delay, I only grew stronger. I didn't care how long it took. I wasn't going to be bullied into giving up what was rightfully mine. Friends started reaching out too. Some were surprised. Some apologized for not seeing it sooner. One of them, Jenna, told me, he always had this way of making himself look like the good guy, you know? I think we all just bought into it. I nodded. I did too, I said. Until I didn't. Eventually, the final court date arrived. I walked into that room with my shoulders back and my chin up. Not because I wanted to prove anything to him, but because I was finally walking in as me, not the version he tried to rewrite. The judge's ruling was clear and fair. I retained full ownership of my business, a fair share of the assets, and the house we built together. His request for alimony? Denied. His claims about me being financially dependent? Dismissed. Adam didn't look at me once. When it was over, I stood in the parking lot for a long moment, just breathing. It felt surreal. Like I had just crossed a finish line I never wanted to run toward in the first place. But I made it. Bruised, maybe, but not broken. On the ride home, I played music for the first time in months. Loud, windows down. It wasn't a victory song, really. Just a song that made me feel alive again. Because that's what I'd been missing all along. Not the marriage. Not the comfort. Not the version of life he tried to sell me. Just myself. And I was finally back. A few weeks after the final ruling, I was still adjusting to the quiet. Not the silence of being alone, I'd gotten used to that long before Adam officially left, but the quiet inside me. The kind that comes after a long storm, when the wind finally dies down and you realize you're still standing. My days started to look different. Mornings weren't rushed anymore. I'd wake up when my body told me to, not to an alarm or the sound of Adam banging drawers in a hurry. I started making coffee just for me, exactly the way I liked it. No compromises. No second mug for someone who barely acknowledged I existed toward the end. It's strange, the little things that come back to life once the weight is lifted. I started drawing again, something I hadn't done just for fun in years. My design studio picked up, too. Clients I hadn't heard from in ages were suddenly reaching out. I didn't know if it was luck, timing, or just the universe throwing me a bone, but it felt like a shift. Like maybe, finally, things were tilting back in my favor. But healing wasn't linear. There were still nights when I'd sit on the couch and remember something random, his laugh from years ago, the way he used to reach for my hand during movies, and I'd feel this pang of grief. Because no matter how things ended, there was a time I loved him. A time I believed in us. That's what people don't talk about enough. That you can hate what someone did to you and still mourn the person they used to be. Or who you thought they were. One Saturday, I decided to clean out the last of the storage closet. It was mostly old boxes, photos, paperwork, knickknacks we never unpacked when we moved into the house. I found our wedding album tucked behind some old textbooks. I almost put it straight into the donation pile, but something made me sit down and flip through it. There we were. Smiling, dancing, laughing like the world belonged to us. I stared at those photos for a long time, trying to match the man in them to the one who sat across from me in court, stone-faced and unrecognizable. I couldn't. That version of him felt like a ghost. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just closed the album, set it aside, and kept sorting. That's the thing about healing, it doesn't always come with fireworks or dramatic moments. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to move forward, one box at a time. A few days later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Rachel, an old college friend who used to double date with Adam and me back when we were still that couple. She was shocked when I told her what had happened. I didn't go into detail, just the basics. But she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter. Happier, even." And I realized she was right. I was lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't carrying his lies anymore. I wasn't tiptoeing around someone else's moods or pretending things were fine when they weren't. The truth had hurt, yes. But it had also set me free. I started seeing a therapist, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd let things get that far without seeing the signs. We talked about boundaries, trust, patterns I hadn't noticed in myself. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was worth it. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was building something solid, this time, inside me. Around that same time, I got a call from my lawyer. She sounded amused when she said, "You're not going to believe this." Apparently, Adam was appealing part of the court ruling. Not the financial division, that he knew better than to touch again. But the house. He was claiming he had emotional ties to the property and believed it should be sold so the proceeds could be split. I laughed out loud. Emotional ties? He's the one who tried to kick me out of it. Exactly, she said. It's not going to hold. But we'll file the response. And we did. The judge dismissed his claim in less than 10 minutes. Another attempt to rattle me, to drag things out, to make me feel unstable again. But it didn't work. I wasn't the woman who sat quietly in the courtroom anymore. I was different now. Stronger. Sharper. And completely done with playing his games. What surprised me most wasn't that he kept trying, it was that he never apologized. Not once. Not during the process. Not after the recordings. Not even in private. It was like he couldn't admit, even to himself, that he'd been caught. That his plan had failed. But that wasn't my problem anymore. One afternoon, I got an email from a mutual acquaintance who used to work with Adam. It was short and polite, something like, "I just wanted to say I admire how you handled everything. A lot of people talk, but you showed real strength." That hit me harder than I expected. Because for a long time, I felt like I was just surviving. I didn't feel strong or brave or admirable. I felt like I was constantly picking up the pieces of a life someone else shattered. But maybe surviving was strength. Maybe not sinking under it all was the quietest kind of power. I started going on walks in the evenings, just to clear my head. I'd plug in my headphones, play soft music, and let the breeze wrap around me as I wandered through the neighborhood. It became a kind of meditation, a reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still whole. One night, I found myself standing outside a small art gallery I used to pass all the time but never entered. On impulse, I went in. The space was small but warm, filled with soft light and bold, emotional pieces that felt like stories told without words. The woman at the counter greeted me with a gentle smile and asked if I was an artist. I paused. And then, for the first time in years, I said, yes. I am. It felt good. True. Like reclaiming a piece of myself that had gone missing in the fog of marriage, courtrooms, and betrayal. I left the gallery with a new print in my hand and something else in my chest. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I was beginning a new chapter. The art gallery visit stuck with me more than I expected. I went back the next week for an open house they were having. I didn't plan to stay long, but I ended up talking to the owner, a kind woman named Mia, for over an hour. She asked about my work, and before I knew it, I was showing her some of my old designs and sketches from my phone. She looked at me like what I'd made was real. Valuable. It had been so long since someone treated my creativity like it mattered, not just as a hobby or a side project, but as something with its own voice. That night, when I got home, I opened my old sketchbooks for the first time in years. Pages of half-drawn ideas, abandoned layouts, rough outlines of things I never had time to finish. I started drawing again. Not for a client, not for money, just because I wanted to. It felt like reclaiming something he never could touch, no matter how much of everything else he tried to take. And yet, Adam still lingered in the corners of my world, like a shadow refusing to disappear. A few days later, I was picking up groceries when I saw him. He was at the self-checkout, scanning items like nothing had happened, like he hadn't tried to wipe out everything we built together with a lie. He didn't see me, at least I don't think he did, but I froze anyway. Just for a moment. My stomach knotted, like an old reflex. But then, I felt something unexpected, calm. He looked tired. Older. His posture was slouched, his movements automatic, robotic. I wondered if he still felt like he'd won, or if the reality of what he'd done was finally catching up to him. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. I walked past, head high, and I left that store feeling free. Like I had just closed a chapter without saying a word. But fate has a funny sense of humor, because a week later, I got a call I didn't expect. It was Adam's sister, Lena. We hadn't spoken since everything blew up. She and I had once been close, bridesmaids in each other's weddings, weekend coffee dates, the kind of sister-in-law you hope for. But when the divorce started, she pulled away. I couldn't blame her. Family gets messy in these things. Claire, she said softly. I hope this isn't too forward, but I wanted to talk. I didn't know how to feel, but I agreed to meet her. We chose a quiet coffee shop outside town, neutral ground. When I walked in, she stood up immediately, her face strained but sincere. "I owe you an apology," she said before I even sat down. I blinked. "For what?" "For not calling. For not checking on you. For believing Adam when he said you were just being difficult." She looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of her napkin. "I didn't know what to believe," she continued. "But when I heard about the recordings, when everything came out in court, I realized I didn't want to know the truth, because it was easier to pretend he was still the brother I grew up with." I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. "I saw him recently," she said. "He's bitter. Always blaming you, even now. But the truth is, you were right to protect yourself. I just wanted you to know that. I'm sorry I wasn't there." I nodded slowly. "Thank you. That means more than you know. It didn't fix everything, but it helped." Closure comes in strange, quiet ways sometimes, like a bridge you thought had burned suddenly standing again, just enough for one honest conversation. After that, I started thinking differently about everything I'd been through. Not just the hurt, but the survival. The fight. The clarity. I began journaling every night, not just about Adam or the divorce, but about who I was now. Who I wanted to become. I wrote about my dreams. My fears. The moments I felt strong and the ones I felt fragile. It wasn't pretty or poetic, but it was real. Honest. And in that space, I found something I hadn't felt in so long. Pride. Not for enduring something painful, but for not letting it define me. And then, something completely unexpected happened. Mia, the gallery owner, emailed me a few weeks after our last conversation. She asked if I'd be interested in contributing to a small exhibit they were doing. Local artists, stories of transformation, healing through creativity. "I think your work fits," she wrote. "And your story matters." At first, I panicked. The idea of sharing my art, and by extension, myself, felt terrifying. But then I remembered how powerless I'd felt in that courtroom, and how powerful I'd felt when the truth was finally heard. Maybe this was a different kind of truth. A different kind of strength. So, I said yes. I submitted 3 pieces. Each one born from a different part of the process: grief, anger, hope. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. I stood in front of them at the exhibit's opening night, watching strangers linger and study the colors, the shapes, the emotion behind the lines. And I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Whole. Not broken. Not just the woman with the divorce story. Just me. One woman approached me, probably in her 40s, with a soft smile and tears in her eyes. "Your work," she said quietly, "it feels like something I've been trying to say but didn't have the words for." I almost cried right there. Because that's all I ever wanted, to be understood. To be seen. To be real again. After the exhibit, I started getting inquiries. Commissions. Invitations to collaborate. It wasn't about becoming famous or making money, it was about finally living life on my terms, not through someone else's expectations or control. That's when I realized Adam had tried to take everything. My security. My home. My identity. But he didn't succeed. Because what I rebuilt after him? He never had the power to destroy that. It's strange how you can spend years building a life with someone, only to find that your real life doesn't even begin until after they're gone. That's how it felt in the months that followed the art exhibit. I started living again. Not just functioning. Not just waking up and getting through the day. But really living, curious, open, present. I tried new things. I went to a pottery class. I took a weekend trip by myself to the coast. I even got brave enough to go on a couple of dates. Nothing serious, just coffee and conversation, but still, it felt like a milestone. I wasn't looking for someone to save me. I wasn't broken anymore. I didn't need fixing. I just wanted to see what it felt like to be seen again. To laugh with someone who didn't carry the ghost of betrayal behind their eyes. One afternoon, I got a message through my website from a woman named Emily. She was around my age and had seen my artwork at the gallery. She wrote about how much it had moved her and how she'd been through something similar. Her husband had walked out on her after 20 years, leaving her blindsided and financially drained. Her message ended with, "Your strength reminded me that it's possible to start again. Thank you for that." I sat there staring at the screen, completely still. Then I wrote back, not with advice or wisdom, but just the truth. That it wasn't easy. That healing didn't come in a straight line. That some days I still felt the sting of everything he did, but most days, I felt peace. We started exchanging emails, then met for coffee a few weeks later.